when you have put it in production, you should monitor data drift, monitor potential bias issues. That means you need to think about what are the risks that we have and how can we measure these risks, in our monitoring, so that we can capture them and change the model if needed. So I think a lot of the discussions that we have, the data is not good, etc. We just need to put in the right processes, the right checkpoints, the right rules to actually make this decision.
Hello everyone, welcome to the 25th episode of the D4 Data Channel podcast. I'm your host Deepak, and with me we have Ms. Afke Schouten. Afke is the founder of AI Bridge, where she primarily focuses on bridging the gap between data science and business. Afke has extensive experience guiding and mentoring organizations on how to use AI effectively. So today we'll be hearing a lot about Afke and her role as a AI strategist. It's a pleasure to have you here today, Afke, and thank you for accepting my invitation.
Thank you so much for having me, Deepak.
Really great to hear. So I'm pretty excited for this 25th episode. Yeah. So I have a few questions for you today, and starting with this one. So, the increased adoption of AI is actually resulting in widespread model development, and ethics and sustainability are usually overlooked. So do you believe this is the best way forward for any AI development solution?
I mean, the question, right? It almost suggests already the answer. I mean, of course not. I would say these are two important topics, right? Both ethics as well as sustainability. It is often overlooked, I believe, not necessarily on purpose, right? It's a very AI, to make it work in an organization. It's a very complex topic that touches every part of the organization, and it's a journey. And what I do see is that those organizations that that have started a bit longer ago, they are starting to think about how to make this work, right? So to put in guidelines, principles, processes to make sure that the projects that they are doing, or the AI systems that they're creating, that they're also aligned to their ethical and sustainable goals of the organization. So I believe, no, it's not the best way forward. It's also a journey that most organizations are going through, and I hope, anticipate, and think that it will be okay in the future. But we do need to be, so to say, very aware of this topic, and make sure that also all the organizations that haven't started it yet are aware that they should be looking at this.
Right. Got it. So, so as an AI translator, how often do you actually encounter a lack of understanding of AI adoption in business organizations, and what are the common mistakes which people used to make?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, more often than not, and I would say very, very often. And I believe, well, right, first, what is adoption? For me, adoption is like we build a machine learning model. We put this machine learning model into an application, and it's being used, and it generates value for the organization. Now, there are two reasons, or two things that I see where it goes wrong. And the first one is very much at the start, so at the ideation phase, when projects are started, that they're not thought through properly, and that a model is being put in production that is actually not helping the business. So it's being implemented, but it's actually not something that is useful. That is one thing that I see goes wrong in organizations. The other one is just the lack of understanding of the sheer size of what it takes to actually put a model into production and what it means to maintain it, right? What people often forget is well, actually, a machine learning model is like it's like a living animal and needs food and drink and taken care of and things like that. So those are the two main mistakes that I see in organizations. And yes, unfortunately, we're still at a point where yeah, we lack this understanding of AI adoption in organizations. Although I need to say it has improved a lot over the last, say, 12 months.
Okay, okay. So, uh, so other aspects regarding this. So, like, what are the economic implications of AI and machine learning, and like how are they going to affect our lives in the future?
Yeah. So I get asked this question a lot actually, and there's a book, maybe you've heard of it, AI in 2041, 10 Visions of Our Future by Chan Kui Fan, and one of the quotes from that book is actually by 2033, 40% of our jobs could be accomplished mostly by AI and automation technologies. And now this is like they're different type of roles, right? So if we're thinking about like social workers or doctors or career counselors and people like that, those are very much like creative social roles. They will be impacted by AI, but the core of their job will not, because it's all about being creative and in between people. But there may be other roles, like thinking about an insurance underwriter or customer support or a radiologist or like visual inspector or things that are asocial, mechanical, where there are a lot of repetitions. Those jobs will change, and those jobs will change significantly, and that means that there will also be an economic impact, right? So I would say that means we can start thinking. I mean, we're not there yet, but we can start thinking about things like universal basic income, for example, like to rethink the way our society works, which is a huge economic impact, right? And at the same time, we also need to think about how are we going to prepare society for this, right? So people that are in endangered jobs, they should be warned, but also given the opportunity to learn new skills for this future, as well as we need to think about organizations need to think about how does our workforce look like today and how will it look like tomorrow with the help of AI, right? So I'm anticipating huge economic and financial impact on organizations.
Okay, okay, true. So, um, yeah. So, how often business teams actually understand the complex nature of these computational hardware, and how how this actually influence the customer demand for these kind of AI products?
Um, maybe a quick question back to you. What do you mean with customer demand here?
So let's say we need to trigger a particular application, and it has to actually process this many set of articles or documents, or this much
Hmm.
input it has to actually process in this much time, and where
Hmm.
we need to use complex hardware such as GPUs or highly computational cores, which can process the data much faster or something like that. So
Hmm.
how often the companies actually overlook these kind of scenarios?
I would say again with like what you asked before, right? The understanding of adoption. Um, I would say probably for most organizations, this is still an unknown, right? Actually, quite recently, I spoke with somebody who told me we're in doing a project around a call center, and we actually have two systems that need to talk to each other, but there's a lack of a couple of seconds between a a request and moving that request to a different application, say, for example, Microsoft Teams. But we need to use the status of this person, and if the person has left, the system will crash, so to say. And this is like it's something we're working in these seconds, right? But it actually has an impact on the whole process, and the automation that we're trying to create here. It doesn't it will not work, right? So and this is something that was overlooked at this project, and nobody realized it, right? And that's just one example. And I think what I mentioned earlier, for most organizations, it's probably still an unknown because they haven't come across the issue yet, because they aren't mature enough to actually see, to actually have tried such projects, and implement such systems that require this type of computational hardware, or using cloud software, and how that impacts the implementation. So I would say, yeah, again, not so much yet, but in my experience, it's like organizations need to typically come across the issue once and then realize it's there, and then understand where else uh, could this issue pop up, and then they will start doing something about it. So,
Okay, okay, got it. So, um, yeah, so in this particular regard, like, do you actually believe that the organizations lack a research mindset when implementing these kind of AI technologies?
yeah, most definitely. What I see, especially in traditional organization, when projects are started, right? And we know when like data science project, we typically start with exploratory data analysis. We have an idea. We don't know yet if it's going to work, but I see often as in a culture of an organization, it's like we started a project, so we need to end it, right? So that means that regardless of whether we find that the model, our accuracy is maybe not very high, but we have already presented this to the board. So we need to pull it all the way through the end. We need to implement it because we said we did it. And with these type of projects, you need to actually be able to stop, right? And to actually know when to stop. It's an iterative process, right? The research mindset that you said. Having said that, there's also the other side. I believe that data scientists sometimes maybe have too much of a research focus, too much of a focus like I just want to work with the data and build my models, and without thinking about what's going to be the business value, right? And does it make sense? So it's a gap that exists, with reasons from both sides, both the organizational side as well as maybe the data science team side, that needs to be bridged from both directions, right? So organizations really need to start implementing like this agile way of working, research focused, being able to say like, oh, let's stop if it doesn't work. And that doesn't mean the project failed, it just means that there's no value in this project. But also at the same time, data scientists, and of course there are exceptions, but this is the general trend that I see, need to also think with the organization. What will be the impact, and does this make sense to continue from a business perspective, right? So it's a bit of both.
Okay, got it. Makes sense. So, yeah, so like on the way the AI teams usually organize, or like how much they are actually putting into these kind of solutions. So like uh, like how organization should ideally respond to the inherent uh, bias which is actually view or like which is evident in some of the data which they are actually working, or even the algorithmic bias which they are working on.
I mean, you hear often, right? So I'd say in the last 1 to 2 years, we've heard so much about AI and ethics and bias, and that this is an issue. Um, that the issue is with the data, right? And that the issue is with the models. And now, of course, this is true, right? Because like it's the nature of building machine learning models. You use the data, and if there's bias in the data, there will be bias in your prediction. If you have a bias model, then there's also bias, right? Having said that, I strongly believe that this topic of algorithmic bias or ethics in general is a matter of AI management. What that means for me is, well, there's multiple different things. So, for example, I think organizations should set up an ethics policy or code of conduct. They need to put in rules. What do we allow? What do we not allow? They should put checkpoints along the process, the different phases of such a project, right? So that means that just a question to ask yourself: is the data that we're using representative of how we're going to use it in production, right? Then when you have put it in production, you should monitor data drift, monitor potential bias issues. That means you need to think about what are the risks that we have and how can we measure these risks, yeah, in our monitoring, so that we can capture them and change the model if needed. So I think a lot of the discussions that we have, yeah, the data is not good, etc. We just need to put in the right processes, the right checkpoints, the right rules to actually make this decision. And what I see in practice is that if this is not in place, then people will have endless discussions about whether something is ethical or not, right? And at the moment you say, well, this is our policy, let's check against our policy if this is okay, then you can make the decision. Yeah. And when it's about the people themselves that need to make the decision, do we want to do this or not? People typically don't want to make the decision, right? Because that's something that can stick to you. So that's for me. For me, the topic of ethics, bias, it's all about setting up your AI management in the right manner.
Okay, okay, got it. So, um, so how critical is it to actually like follow existing data protection and legal frameworks when implementing this AI in business?
I mean, I think also that one is it's suggestive, right? Like, of course, this is it is important, very important, especially when we think about, I mean, in the European Union, right? There's this draft EU AI Act, and it's not in place yet, but we need to get ready for it. And when we don't get ready for it, we will get into trouble, right? That means that, I mean, maybe models that you have in production you need to stop, and that itself is a risk for a business. And of course, today already we need to comply with the laws that are there, right? So again, in Europe, we have the GDPR, about data privacy, that is in place, that we need to check. And I mean, what I've seen in larger organizations, that this actually also happens, right? So before a project gets started, especially if personal data is involved about employees or customers, that legal gets involved and tells what is allowed to do or what not. Now, it is not always the case that people in these departments truly understand what is needed, but I do see, right? So I have had several students that are actually working in those kind of departments in organizations that really want to understand what it means to build AI models so that they can actually support this process in a better way. But especially with looking at the future, I mean, governments are starting to get ready. They are building new regulations, and I hope that we get to the point that we that this is implemented, but not just implemented and in place, but also that the audits will take place, because especially for higher risk systems, it will be very important for us as a society, right? So also for you and I as a consumer, that this is set up in the right way.
Over to the next point, Afke. So regarding the AI management, so according to you, what do you think is actually the AI management, and like what are the different maturity stages in an organization for it?
Yeah. So for me, AI management is all about everything you need in an organization to make it work, right? So that we already spoke about adoption. Yeah, adoption meaning we have a model in production and it generates value. Now, what do you need to make that work? It's about setting a vision for your organization. What type of company do I want to be with AI, right? Do I want to be the leader? Do I want to be the follower? Do I want, what do, like, think about cars, right? Do I want to be the Tesla, or do I want to be, well, take any car company that is not building self-driving cars or anything in between? What's our strategy, right? So that means, what use cases do we strategically decide to implement, and what does that mean for the technology that we're going to use? What does that mean for our data management? What does that mean for the people that we're going to hire? How are we going to upskill them? How is our organizational setup going to be? So where is this team, or are there different teams, and how do they work together? Who do we work together with? Partnerships. Um, how are we going to take care of those legal issues and ethical issues? We already talked about that, but also thinking about, so how do we run these projects, right? What are the different phases that we're going through? What are the milestones? How are we going to make decisions? The different processes that are there. So for me, that is AI management, and that's obviously not very different from other parts in the organization of how to manage, but we know, right? It's because it's so complex. It is a different field, and you can't manage AI in the same way that you manage other things. It's because what we said earlier, right? An AI system is a living animal. Now, when we speak about like maturity levels, and there are different maturity models out there, but most commonly it's like 4 to 5 phases that you see. The first one is companies that just getting started, right? So we maybe do like a proof of concept, having a first tryout, and see where is this going, right? It's typically a push from somebody in the organization that says like, oh, I want to get this topic started. I find it interesting, but there's not necessarily a lot of budget available, technology not available, the data may still be a mess, etc. Then the second phase that you see organizations going to is like, okay, now we're starting to build a larger team. We have multiple proof of concepts. We create awareness in the organization. We start to maybe buy some technology to help us putting models into production, things like that. And then the third phase, and that is, I would say, also there's those organizations that maybe started their journey, say 6, 7, 8 years ago. They're like working on making this next step. Is really, you could call it enterprise empowerment, right? So now we've learned a lot, and now we're also pushing the responsibility to the business, and the business is actually pulling. They understand what it takes to build such systems, but they also see the opportunities. Um, we have multiple AI models in production. They're actually being used, generating value. We start thinking about how to upskill the whole organization to work with this, and so on. And then the last step, and I must say, I mean, perhaps a handful of big tech firms are there, is really like it's embedded across the whole organization. So everybody lives and breathes AI, really sees opportunities. All the decisions that are being made are data driven. There's a good technological environment. We have a short time from an idea to putting something into production. We understand how to measure success, to make decisions about whether to move a project to a next phase or not, and things like that. And obviously, like a good monitoring practice, and with all the AI management that I spoke about before, is being in place.
Okay, okay. That gives a good amount of idea actually about it. So, um, so regarding this particular question, so what does it takes to adopt a successful AI adoption system in traditional organizations, which you have actually worked upon?
Yes, I mean, unfortunately, a lot. I've asked myself this question. I've been asking myself this question for a while, right? When I started my journey, I was like, well, why does it not work? Why is it so difficult? And together with one of my teachers, actually last year, we did a small research project where we basically from the literature, right, tried to identify all the different success factors. So what is it? What do you need to make it work? And we came over for 85 success factors, and I will not call them all out, but a few maybe interesting ones. So one is taking away the fear, right? People that don't understand what artificial intelligence is, they maybe think like, one, it's magic, or it's there to come and take away my job, right? So taking away the fear. We re and upskilling the workforce, so that people, well, understand what it is, what actually can be done with it, but also what it takes to implement, or what it takes to use such systems. A third one, which I find super interesting, is setting the incentives right for AI to work. There's this example of a colleague of mine worked in an organization, or an ex-colleague of mine worked in an organization, and built a machine learning model that would allow basically the boss of this person to let go of 40 people, and the person had 80 people in their department. Now, this organization is a lot about power, about making career, etc. And one of the things that is a way to make career in this organization is the number of people that you have reporting to you, right? So the incentive is to not let go of people. So to rather have more people in your team than not. So you can imagine this project was killed, right? So this is a very soft thing, but it's a lot about the culture of the organization. If the incentives are not right, for senior management to implement machine learning models in their organization, in their part of the business, then you can forget it. No? Another one is just a culture of collaboration and agility. Agility we spoke about already before, but like collaboration, there again, I've seen multiple examples of like people sit on their data and they don't want to share it, right? So if there's not a culture of collaboration and you don't get the data to use it, it's going to be difficult. Another thing is like C-level support, and there I can clearly say I have not seen an organization being successful widespread with moving the topic of AI forward without C-level support. So there are many different ways, and I think the key takeaway for me from this research is one is most of those factors are actually soft factors. So it's not all about the technology. It's about culture. It's about incentives. It's about understanding mindset of people. Secondly, is to make it work. It's not just a side hustle, right? It's a transformation. So you hear a lot in the market about the digital transformation, and I see it in the same way with AI. It's an AI transformation that you need to go through. Without it, you can maybe do 2, 3 projects and implement it successfully. But beyond that, once you've taken away those low-hanging fruits, you need the transformation to make it work widely in an organization.
Okay, okay. Yeah, yeah, makes a lot of sense actually. Really great that you shared that experience. So, um, so over the maturity aspect, so like coming on to the domain-centric AI developments which are being extensively in this particular time. So, in which business domain do you believe like AI is well established and like the AI adoption is widespread?
I spoke before, right, about the digital transformation, and actually the AI transformation I see is the one that follows on that, or sort of runs parallel. And it may not surprise you after I've said that those organizations that are, so to say, digital native are better at the AI transformation than others. So think about internet companies, e-commerce, things like that, is where I see it goes a lot quicker. And it's mainly because they are digital native. A lot of those success factors that we found, you could also put for success factors for the digital transformation to work, right? And so digital native companies, e-commerce, internet companies, things like or organizations like that. And from what I see, right, from my point of view, when we look at the more traditional industries, there are not industries as a whole where I say like all organizations are ahead. But from my point of view, and again, this is also partially about because I'm in Switzerland and these are the type of organizations that I see. But here, pharma and insurance are ahead of other industries. There are in those industries a few organizations that are a lot more mature than others. For example, in banking, I see there are also things moving, but they're not as fast moving as, for example, the insurance industry.
Okay, okay, got it. So, so how important is a human in the loop mechanism for validating the inferences coming out from the AI in these kind of domains?
I mean, so I think it's important to distinguish, right? Because when you build a model, you can implement it in different ways. You can implement it as decision support or decision automation, or maybe even also automating the action that takes afterwards. And I would say it is very important to always have some kind of human in the loop, and it can be in a different way. So what I advise typically is to say your first version implement it as a decision support. Collect the feedback, make the decision yourself, and basically validate how well was your prediction and would you have taken the same decision, right? So, and then afterwards, with that feedback, you can retrain your model. And at one point, you can say, okay, I can now allow the system to make the decision. But then once you do that, monitoring gets even more important, right? So then you need to think about what are the ways that the model could potentially make a wrong decision. What is the risk that is involved with that, right? Identify those risks and basically implement the rules. And there again, you can think about um, uh, uh, when you monitor a model in production to say, like, we'll go and check every day what type of decision it made. Or you can actually also already, with that as a next step, say, I'm going to look at what are the things that I monitor, what do I look at, and implement those as a rules, and maybe set up an automatic alert. But in any case, I would say it's important to always have a human in the loop to validate that the model is doing the right thing for your organization. And that can be in different ways. And also another way to decide how to do that is just general from a risk perspective, right? Thinking about Netflix, it's the classical example. If Netflix makes a recommendation that I don't like, what's the risk, right? Yeah, I cancel my subscription. That's a business risk. But if I think about a doctor, a radiologist looking and telling me you don't have cancer, whereas I do, that's a whole different story, right? The risk is a lot higher. So it also really depends on the type of model that you are implementing.
Okay, yeah, true. I completely agree that. So, um, so just want to hear your thought on this particular statement. So, like, do you believe the future of AI is the future of work?
Obviously, I'm biased, but yes, I believe the future of AI is the future of work. I mean, we spoke about this already a bit before, that it will touch everyone, right? And it already touches everyone in that we use Google Maps, right? We use Google Translate, and there are so many examples. It already affects our lives. Um, Even more so, what I said before, some roles may disappear completely, some will stay but change, but it will touch upon all of us in the same way that the Industrial Revolution touched all of us, and in the same way that the introduction of the personal computer touched all of us. And I don't think we can oversee yet how it's going to look like, but I have this a news item in my mind of the 90s where people talked about mobile phones, and they said, like, yeah, no, I don't need a mobile phone, like, I have a phone at home, I don't want to be called all day, etc. But now these days everybody has a mobile phone, right? And it just, without it, you are not able to live life. And I'm pretty sure that with AI it will be the same, but how it's going to look like, I think this is still unclear. I think we cannot imagine it right now how that will look like.
Yeah, we got it. So, what are the difficulties do you encounter actually in explaining how AI can be actually successfully implemented?
Mhm. For me, the main difficulty is at the moment still, unfortunately, a lack of AI literacy. And what I mean with AI literacy is actually three things. So the first one is that people don't understand what AI is, and especially what it isn't. Right? I've had many times that people ask me, Afka, can you do some AI magic? And then really like coming up with an idea solution that would basically require artificial general intelligence, right? Um, the second, or maybe to that first one, I do notice that this gets a lot better, right? So if I think about, because I teach a lot, 3 years ago, the questions that students would ask would be different than it is today. So there is the general understanding of what AI is and what it isn't has improved a lot. The second is like, what can you actually do with AI? So for people to understand the different type of use cases there are, and to become creative, to find use cases for their organization, right? So that you really notice that you need to take people by the hand and kind of show them what is out there, what can be done. So thinking about, well, just computer vision, natural language processing, to the people have the understanding of what is possible. Also, that gets better. The third one is for me what it takes to implement a machine learning model, to productize it, to run it in production and to maintain it. And this is still something where we lack a lot. Maybe only those organizations that have come through the third level of maturity that we spoke about earlier, they start to see what it takes, right? But just as an example, working on a project right now, and we're at the point where, good, they understand what AI is, they have ideas what can be done with it, but now it's about, okay, how do we get started? So questions: what kind of people and skills do I need in my team? What technology do I need? How long is this project going to take? How much money is it going to cost? Right? Is there, and it's not because they don't want to, but it's just something that they don't know yet, where they still need a lot of help. And when you are in an organization that also doesn't want to hear what it takes, then it becomes very frustrating. And that's something that I hear often, that data scientists struggle with. They are typically in organizations that focus on those two, three low hanging fruits, but not on the transformation side of things, to make it work, right? Um, and lastly, what I also see is there are some organizations, that on the one side they just do too well, right? Their business runs so well they don't see the need to innovate. Or secondly, what I also sometimes come across, that there is a senior management C-level that are close to their retirement, and they hope and wait to sit it out until their retirement to not touch this complex new topic, right? So yeah.
Okay, okay, got it. So my last question for today, and so it's about your company AI Bridge. So, like, what are the future plans for AI Bridge, and how it's actually adapting to different changes in the AI landscape?
Yeah, I mean, so my mission, right? My mission is to, on the one side, to help organizations generate value with AI, but also to foster an environment in which data scientists can actually thrive, right? And not come across all of these issues and roadblocks that we're all so aware of. At the moment, yeah, it has a lot to do with the current challenges. That is about creating awareness, and this AI literacy in organizations. In the future, right? And that's something that I work on or prepare for at the side. I anticipate a lot more work around governance setup, defining standardized processes, like and a topic that I anticipate will become a lot larger in the future is how to define success, how to measure success, and how to manage your AI organization or project or product portfolio, thinking about, well, on the one side, maximizing the return on investment. Yeah, so that means like understanding when to stop, what transformational projects to start, etc. But also the whole topic of risk management, which will become a lot larger, especially when we're getting closer to these regulations coming into place. So that's basically on the strategic managerial side, and definitely will keep focusing on analytics translation. That is for me personally the bread and butter. So really making this translation from, I have a business objective, what kind of model am I going to build to actually achieve this objective. So keep teaching, guiding, mentoring, coaching organizations to do the right analytics translation.
Great, great. So that covers all my question for today, Afke, and thank you so much for providing all this very valid information regarding this, how we are actually leveraging the power of AI in, like, and how the business is actually taking it forward, and from your experience and from your exposure, like regarding these examples which you have really mentioned. So like it gives a lot of idea regarding how much AI is being kind of like what is the maturity level of AI in these kind of organizations, and what can they do to make it much better than what they are currently doing. So
Yes.
it's really great, yeah, being with you here today, and thank you so much, Afke. Thank you.
You're welcome, and thank you so much for your time. And maybe like to close off, I would say we're really at the start of the journey, right? Think about the introduction of the computer. We're probably at the end of the 80s, maybe early 90s. So there's still a lot of work to do. Don't lose hope. Things will get a lot better, and we are learning collectively as an industry and moving this topic forward. Thanks so much for having me today.